Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. This is the Cold Steel Holdout 2. This is the middle size version of this. It comes in a larger size with a 6-inch blade and a smaller size with a 3-inch blade. This is the 4-inch bladed version. As far as I was concerned, the most not only desirable because it's just the most kind of well-rounded of the three. Small enough that it carries easily in pocket, but large enough that you're not really sacrificing anything. And so this was definitely the one I was interested in. This is an Andrew Demko design, and it's based on a Scottish scene-do. Now, that sounds really weird, but you're probably familiar with Scottish scene-dos. If you've ever seen a parade, it's the traditional dagger that the bagpipers would have in their sock. Okay, so that's the inspiration for this knife. Now, obviously, it's a fair departure from that. But it is a pretty cool blade, and because of that inspiration coming from a traditional dagger, it looks different than a lot of the folding knives that are out there. That's one of the cool things about it, and one of the reasons that I was drawn to it for sure, and maybe you are too. I kind of like blades that are doing something a little different than the average everyday folding knife, and so this is certainly doing something a little different. Let's go ahead and get into size and weight on this, and before I zoom in, I've got some other knives to compare. So let's give you the size and weight on this. First of all, this is a 9-inch overall knife, 4-inch blade, 5-inch handle. Breaks down pretty easily. Okay, now I want to do a couple of things before I tell you the weight, because I want to share with you some competitive options, some alternate options that are also going to make an interesting point about the weight on this knife. So this is the Recon 1. You can see they're very similar in size. This is a 9¼ inch knife, so it's only a 1/4 inch difference. You're still basically dealing with a 4-inch blade, but this knife weighs in at 5.3 ounces. Okay, now here's another Cold Steel. One of my favorite, not just Cold Steels, but my favorite knives in my whole collection. This is the American Lawman. It is 8 inches and it weighs in at 4.5 ounces. Okay, now you look at the size comparison there, much smaller. However, this knife weighs less than both of those at only 4.2 ounces. And so you're getting a very big, very useful blade in a very lightweight, easy to carry package. In fact, this is also thinner in this dimension. So in your pocket, not only is this lighter, but it's also thinner. So you're going to notice it even that much less. So really, really great blade to weight to size ratio. You can carry a fairly lightweight, small size. I know it's not small, it's a 5-inch handle, but smaller in size, very thin, very easy to carry, and yet you have a whole lot of blade, a whole lot of capability here. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about that blade next, now that we've gone over those specs. So this one more time: 4 inches, 5 inches, 9 inches, 4.2 ounces. Okay, there you go. That's the Coles Nose version. Now let's come in just a little bit so we can talk about the blade. This blade is, of course, 4 inches of AUS-8A steel, and Cold Steel's AUS-8A does perform pretty well. I would compare it to any of your budget steels. It's not that hard to sharpen. It's a little softer maybe than 154 cm, but it's close to 154 cm when you're sharpening it and doing stuff with it. Okay, it's sort of that mid-range. It's a little better than budget steel. It's a little worse than what we'd consider high quality steel, but it's very functional and very useful as an EDC steel. This blade is full flat grind, and you've heard me and probably tons of other people talk about how useful a full flat ground blade is. Most EDC tasks are going to be performed very well by a full flat ground blade. Most cutting tasks in general. Notice the knives in your kitchen, most of those are going to be full flat ground, just because they know most cutting tasks that involve pushing through any kind of material like vegetables, a full flat grind is going to excel at that. It allows you to have quite a thin profile here, so there's not a lot of steel behind that cutting edge, meaning you're not trying to force a lot of material. If you compare it to a knife like this, where you have hollow grind, now this is a very high hollow grind, and so performs exceptionally well, but eventually you get to where you're pushing a fairly substantial amount of steel by the time you get back here to the spine through a material. So let's say you're cutting a tomato or a piece of wood or whatever, you're going to get more pinching of this blade than you are with this one. Okay, That's why full flat grinds are so handy. Now there's one limitation, and that is the tip is rather thin on this. You can see as you look this way, you're getting thinner, 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 to a very thin point. Now, very acute point is great for penetration, good for any kind of thrusting cut, good for maybe opening packages where you're just sticking the tip in and kind of moving it around the outside of a bubble pack or something. But there is the potential for damage there. You could break it, especially if you drop this or you harshly stab it into something. Let's say you jab this into a piece of wood to carve your name in the wood, and you bend it over to break the piece out. If you've watched any of Jankerson's videos, he does that. He stabs into a piece of log and tries to bend it over. You could damage the tip on this knife more easily than say this one, which carries more width out toward the tip, or even more easily than this one, which again carries a greater amount of steel closer out to the end than that one does. Okay, so kind of keep that in the back of your mind. In terms of deployment, pretty standard deployment. By the way, this is a satin finish, which I think is a nice departure for cold steel. I wish a lot of their other knives were available in this finish instead of just black all the time. I really like this option, and of course you can see that with my American Lawman. I did it myself. I'm probably going to do that with the Recon one as well. Let's back up a little bit so we can get into deployment and lockup. This is of course the triad lock, which is going to be about the strongest lock of any folding knife available. Super, super strong, but the limitation is that it's not going to be as fast. Now over time, as this wears in and as you oil it, you can get a pretty good wrist flick and open it quickly. Do that one more time for you. You can see it is possible to open fast, but cold steels tend to be a little harder to open than other blades. It's not an axis lock. You can't spider flick it. You can't, flip it like with a flipper. So it's going to be a little slower, or just take a little more practice. And I've become pretty proficient. I'll do that one more time just to demonstrate that even though, yeah, good job, fail on camera. But anyway, the point is, even though cold steels are a little harder to open, you can get to the point where you can open them fairly quickly. And once you do, the lockup is superb. Now, again, you really have to ask yourself, am I buying a knife that I want to play with? Because if I am, probably a Benchmade axis lock is going to be better. But if I'm buying a knife to use and I want to know that I've got the strongest lock available, I'm willing to sacrifice the ability to flick this knife open and closed all day and favor the strength and reliability of the lock, which is where cold steels really, really shine. And so the triad lock is just one of those super unbeatable locks. So you've got a really, really strong knife. And again, keep in mind that weight. You're only talking about 4.2 ounces. Now, if I remember, I will put in the description box a video of the Cold Steel R&D lab where they hang 400 pounds off this knife and the lock does not fail. So even though it's fairly lightweight, you still have a very, very strong, very capable folding knife here, okay? So lockup is fantastic. Now let's get to the handle. The handle is one of those areas where some people are probably going to take an issue. It's fairly thin in this dimension, but fairly wide in this dimension. That means when you grip this knife, you've got quite a bit of potential for discomfort. Now it's not uncomfortable. All the edges are nicely rounded, and I've used this quite a bit, and I haven't had any, I'm not like getting a lot of fatigue or blisters or hot spots. It's a very comfortable handle. However, notice that the retention on this handle, that is how it stays in your hand, is achieved almost 100% through the grippy texture of the G10. Extremely grippy, no question. The jimping that's carved in here is, yeah, not doing a whole lot. You can see my thumb moves fairly easily, almost as easily. Now, yeah, it's a little slicker here than here, but barely. There's also some jimping on the bottom here. Presumably the idea there is to keep this finger from sliding up onto the blade if you were ever in a combat situation. I would prefer to grip the blade further back and use this little cutout, which is actually there so you can access the thumb stud. Notice that. So there's a cutout here to make the thumb stud a little more accessible, but it does serve as a bit of a finger choil, although not a deep one. And so if you are thinking to use this knife as a combat knife, you know, as a self-defense tool, as, you know, you're a police officer or military, or, you know, you're whatever, special ops, and you're planning to drop into a parachute and use this knife to engage in combat, probably the Recon 1 would serve you a little better, because you can see that very deep finger choil there and an absolutely locked in grip on the Recon 1. Not exactly the same on this. Now, on the other hand, if you are one of these guys that does martial arts and are very proficient at knife fighting, one of the things that this handle does is allows for every kind of grip variation you could think of. Similar kind of design philosophy to the Otonashi no Ken from James Williams, where James specifically says, hey, I designed the handle this way, and that is kind of all the same on all sides from all angles. And he says, I designed it purposely that way because no matter which way you try to use the knife, you're going to get a similar feel, you're going to get a similar level of ability. And so this knife does move very easily in hand, and that is facilitated further by these cutouts. Now these holes that are drilled in are reducing a lot of weight, and they're also adding to the grip, because when you grip the knife, what happens is the tips of your fingers kind of naturally fall into those holes and do add extra retention. Okay, so those holes are more than for just looks. They also lighten the knife, and they also add to the grippiness of the handle. Could I wish for something happening here or here that would allow for a little more grip? Sure, that would be nice. But overall, I can't really offer too many complaints about this handle. It is comfortable, it is functional, it's extremely lightweight. No lanyard hole here. If you put the lanyard through that last hole, it is going to get cut by the blade, so that's not really an option. Finally, the pocket clip. This pocket clip is a bit of a departure for Cold Steel, and reference the pocket clip on the American Lawman, which is very short and very tight. This is longer. Now, the steel, the springiness in the steel is similar on these two, but because of the extra length, this one is not quite as aggressive as this one. And that's actually a real win, because as you know, everyone complains about these Cold Steel pocket clips and how they're too tight and can be difficult to put in and out of pocket. This one I have not adjusted in any way. Most of the time I do a slight tweak to the handle, to the pocket clip on my Cold Steel knives, just to make it a little easier in and out of pocket. I've not adjusted this one at all, and I don't find the need to do that at all. Now it is repositionable to left side carry, only tip up though, no tip down carry for this, which is fine as far as I'm concerned. Most people, of course, prefer tip up carry, which is why Cold Steel did it that way. If you really, really like tip down carry, this knife is not going to be an option for that variation. Okay, now let's give my overall impression of this blade. I think this is a great knife, very lightweight. If you want to carry a knife, maybe you're backpacking or camping or something, and you want to really, really cut the weight as much as you can, but not sacrifice much in terms of usability, this knife I think is a very, very good option. It's lightweight, it's comfortable in hand, you still have all 4 inches of steel there, plus in my scenario that I described where you're hiking or camping, you have a knife blade style that is going to literally do everything. It'll help you process firewood, it will prepare food, it will, not perfectly, but it'll even skin an animal. There's enough belly here that you could do some skinning tasks if you needed to. Not ideal. The American Lawman with a deeper belly closer to the front would be more useful for that. But there is some belly here, which makes it a very versatile knife. It just will do everything. And so the only thing that I could see putting some people off, if you're just looking for a great knife that's going to do really well, this is a good option, except for, I will admit, it looks different than what you're used to. Okay, a lot of people I think are going to be more drawn to a more traditional knife shape, something they're used to seeing, something they kind of expect from a folding knife. This is not that. This is very different. It's different in its look, it's different even in the way it feels in hand, and even the blade shape being a spear point, it looks a little different. The other thing I would say about this knife is it could be a little off-putting. Open this up in public and this looks like the kind of knife that is used for inflicting damage on another human being. It doesn't have to be that way, and as everyone has said, it's been said a million times, the use of a tool is up to the person using it. It's not up to the tool, but certain people will likely be put off by the shape of this knife. You'd probably get away more with you know, an American Lawman or even a Recon 1 than you would with this knife, because this just looks built to penetrate, built to stab. Okay, and to an extent that's true. It's modeled after a dagger. So overall, I think this is a great knife. I think it's a great addition to a collection. I even think that in this option or the next size down, the 3-inch option, this could be a great EDC knife. It has served me very well as an EDC knife, and I can definitely see getting a lot of usefulness out of this blade. Really, really handy little knife. Not little, but very, very handy blade. Lots of functionality for a very light weight. That's my take on the Cold Steel Holdout 2. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you soon.